Good afternoon, everybody. I'm honored to be here to talk to you today about what it really takes to build a performing partnership, one that's really going to transform your community outcomes. And by performing, I actually don't mean that you need to worry about trying to do this. Okay, that's my daughter, by the way. But instead, you need to be thinking about what are those outcomes that matter in my community that I need to be achieving. And so what I want to share with you today is what we're learning from our work around the world and from the literature in the organizational change world and community change world about what it really takes for partnerships to be tremendously powerful. And as the speakers have already noted, there's an urgent call for action in your community as in others because of the kinds of outcomes that children and families are facing today. This is just the beginning of that list, but the list is long. So there's an urgent need to figure out, if we're going to come together, how do we ensure that this work is really making a difference? And as Christina noted, what we're recognizing about problems just like this is that they're actually called wicked problems. And what we know about wicked problems is they create for us wicked opportunities. But don't be afraid, okay? What I'm going to share with you now is how can you be addressing a wicked problem. What we have to understand is why up until now we haven't been effective. And that's because how all of you have been trained by people like me, university professors, to think about community problems. And how we've been trained to think about them is something like this. Tell me if you know this story in your community. We have lots of youth that aren't graduating from high school. And the reason is because, boy, they just don't have those academic skills. So we're going to provide a lot of mentoring and after-school programming to get them there and hope that they do that. Oh, and by the way, we might need another program, too, to help their parents know how to support their education at home. Okay? We might even layer a few more programs, and oh yeah, they're going to be evidence-based because we care about that, okay? But what we've discovered is that is never enough. And why is that? When we think about community problems like this, we are treating them as though they are simple. We can figure out the cause. The same cause is true for everybody in the community. And all we have to do is figure out one solution that will work and apply it, and we'll have success. Problems actually don't look like this. They look like this. We call this the orange box problem. And your challenge as a community and as a set of partners is to figure out what are those orange boxes that are working together to keep these poor outcomes in place. Because let me tell you, they're working together to keep the status quo as it is. And what we've discovered is that it is only those partnerships that understand that the problem is complex, it lives in a space like this, that real change starts to happen. Let me give you a story to sort of illustrate this for you. So, first let me sort of share with you, in your community, I was very impressed. You have this ecosystem map that's been developed by the Clark Fox Foundation. And for me, this is a great illustration of the kind of complexity that does exist. Here we have just the beginning of organizations that are focused on addressing child well-being. They span a ton of social issues. They're connected in different ways. And this is just the beginning of what it's like for a person who wants to try to promote child well-being. It's incredibly difficult because these organizations might have different rules, different policies for how they do their work, different ways of working, and they're operating in different places in the community. And what we often do is we take good programs, we plop it into a context that looks like this. And those programs fail, and what we do is we blame the child and the family for that failure. Let me tell you a story from my state of Michigan that will highlight this for you. In Michigan, we were very lucky in that our elected officials recognized that school readiness was an outcome that was a must for all children in our state. And that's something that was needed to help promote school readiness was to increase the access to state-funded pre-K slots. So several years ago, our governor passed legislation that increased funded pre-K slots by 16,000. Okay, we got another about 16 the following year. But in the first year they launched 16,000, every county got additional slots. And everybody thought, yay, we're going to have such a wait list. So many families are going to want to take advantage of those slots. What we discovered instead was that most communities were not able to fill those slots. In fact, most had only 50% of their slots filled. And what do you think happened? What do you think was the story in communities about this? Oh, those poor families, they're lazy. They don't care about their child. That's why they're not taking them to the pre-K system. We had the advantage to work in those communities to find out, well, what's really behind the fact that low-income families aren't taking advantage of this new resource, and this is what we learned. So there were some parents who didn't understand the value of education, but that's because nobody had taken the time to do outreach to help the people in the community understand that pre-K matters. Number two, most communities took those full-day pre-K slots, divided them in half to make them half-day options so they could save more children. But just think about what that must be like for a single mom who has a job and has multiple kids to take to multiple places. A half-day slot doesn't work for them. Pediatricians, who are the most trusted resource in most communities, weren't even told this was an option, so they didn't have an opportunity to refer, so most families didn't even know that this was something they could take advantage of. Head Start, also dealing with low-income families, had a long wait list in some communities of over 1,000 families that could qualify for these slots, but they didn't tell the state-funded pre-K program about it because they were worried they would lose their funding if they didn't have people on their wait list. There was no transportation. These slots were all over the county. Some of them would have taken 45 minutes to an hour for a family to get their child to that slot. And they never asked the parents what this and how this should be designed. Okay? So this is a story that happens in America almost every day. And so our challenge is, if we want to make outcomes happen, we have to start to recognize the complexity of the work that we're dealing with so that the partnership efforts we're doing actually really matter.